Hello, welcome back to the Frontliner History channel, and thank you for waiting for nearly 2 years. It have been busy lately, but now that I sorted everything out, I can finally go back and make more videos now. Today's topic is very special. It is about my great granddad in the French Indochina War. So without further ado, let's get to it. To talk about great granddad's story, I need to mention the war he was in first. That is the French Indochina War. So the French Indochina War, you probably never heard of it. It happened at the beginning of the Second World War. That's why it got overshadowed quite a bit. So for this war is between Thailand and French Indochina. French Indochina territory are the territory of modern day Vietnam, Laos and Cambodia. But these territories were in French control back then. So the tensions are pretty much that back in the colonization age, Thailand lost a lot of its territory to France. And coming up to the French Indochina War, one of the borders at Mae Klong River is the peak of tension between the two nations. So the treaty stated that the deepest part of Mae Klong River will be the area to separate Thai borders and French Indochina borders. But there were several violations of these treaties. But after a while, the tension dived down after more neutral treaties have been made. However, once France fell to Germany, things got heated up even more. The new Vichy French government in Indochina was forced to make a neutral agreement, and Thailand made several proposals. One of them is that Thailand will gain some territory back that they lost many years ago. The French Indochina government disagreed and agreed to many proposals, and one of the disagree was that Thailand won't gain their territory back. And this higher tension in Thailand. Many citizens and students came out on the street to protest, demanding that the country go to war with France to gain this territory back. And after many weeks, Thai forces started to mobilize on the border, and the French also retaliated by deploying their own force to the border. This would lead to the Thai and French Indochina War in 1940. Since the Thai and French forces have mobilized, some shooting and fighting have broken out at the border in the north and east of Thailand. But the official declaration of war haven't been made yet, so this was merely a small confrontation. On the cold morning of 28th of November 1940, Pilot Officer Sanit Nomani and Corporal Prayun Sukumonjan just came back from their 1-hour morning patrol, and they have just landed their V-93 Corsair back at the airfields, and they were brewing coffee for break. At that moment, they noticed an aircraft sound over their airfields and ran out to investigate. They found out that it was a protest French fighter above them. So they hurried to their aircraft, abandoning their coffee break. Luckily, the engine was still warmed, and they immediately took off to intercept the plane. After they finally took off in their Corsairs to intercept the French protests, when they got to the plane's tail, they realized that 5 more Moran fighters are behind them. Corporal Prayun Sukumonjan, who was a rear gunner on the Corsairs, immediately fired up on all 5 aircraft, and he spread all his bullets to all of the enemy's aircraft. But then he realized that if he keeps shooting like this, he won't be able to shoot any of it down. So he started to focus his fire on only one plane. And after a peaceful dogfight, he managed to down one of the French plane. And after his plane ran out of ammo, they took their planes back to the airfield. That was when the airfield sent 2 additional Hawk 3 fighters to assist them, and finally they drove the French Moran back, and the Corsairs landed back safely at the airfields. From this action, Both pilots were awarded a Medal of Bravery for their actions, and this was the first aerial victory in Thai history. And Corporal Prayun Sukumonjan was my great-granddad. Now moving on to the 10th of October 1940. This is perhaps one of the most memorable days in Thai history. But before I talk about this, I need to address the elephant in the room first. And that is the Thai-French Indochina War are shrouded in mystery, even to this day. And this is because the lack of information we could have gathered about this war. For example, if I were to search up one information from one source, and if I were to search up the same information from another source, the information I can get might be completely different or just doesn't match. For the information regarding the 10th of October 1940, information varied across all sources, making it very hard finding out what actually happens. However, after some research, I believe there are two trustworthy sources. First one stated that the Thai Air Force launched an attack on French base in Vientiane. However, the second source stated that the French Air Force launched an air attack in Udon Thani. And as you can see, even the most trustworthy one are completely different from one another. And even worse, the first source stated that my great-granddad was on the same plane with pilot Sanit Nuanmani, which can't be true, definitely, because otherwise he won't be telling my granddad what happened on that day. Okay, but after some more research, I believe that I have found the one that seems to be the most trustworthy. This one managed to piece all the information I have together into one complete story. And before we go on to talk about this next story, I need to tell you first that I will be mixing the information I have gathered with the stories of my great-granddad from his point of view. This story started on the 8th of October 1940. On the 8th of October, the Thai Air Force launched a large air attack on French base in Vientiane. It is stated in many sources that pilot Sanit was in this battle. However, it is unconfirmed that my great-granddad participated in this assault. 2 days later, on the 10th of October, is where everything really went down. Pilot Sanit and my great-granddad just came back from their morning patrol, just like last time, and when they landed their Corsairs back on the ground, they took a short break. Suddenly, all hell broke loose when a large French aircraft formation was spotted over the base, and while all pilots scrambled for their aircraft, bombs started dropping. Great-granddad and pilot Sanit were quite far away from the aircraft, so they took a shortcut. The airfield is covered all around with barbed wire except the gate, but there's no time to run for the gate, so they took a shortcut under the barbed wire. Pilot Sanit got under the barbed wire quite unharmed, but great-granddad got injuries on his forehead. And because the blood from his injury were blinding his eyesight, he can't see very well. He asked pilot Sanit to wait for him while he get treated, but when great-granddad finally reached his aircraft, he realized that pilot Sanit have already taken off with another rear gunner. By the time majority of the Thai aircraft got onto the air, a lot of French planes have already finished their bombing run and are returning to their base. A new order came in, however, for the existing aircraft on the air to pursue the enemy aircraft and perform a counterattack at their base. On their way to the base, the unexpected happened, however. Pilot Sanit's plane was hit in the fuel tank from anti-air gunfire, immediately igniting the entire plane on fire. Sergeant Cherleum Damsamrit, who was a rear gunner on the aircraft, was killed immediately. But pilot Sanit suffers burn injury and a hit on the knees. He managed to turn his aircraft around, cross the Maeklong River, and bail out over Nong Khai province. However, although he survived from his plane, he would die later on the 23rd of October 1940 in hospital. The sudden sad news about the passing of pilot Sanit Nuanmani was a shocking news for the Thai people. He was quite a skilled and famous pilot for the Thai Air Force since the first aero battle. And he was also a very close friend to great granddad since they joined the Air Force together, so this was a very unexpected and sad news for him too. And when a funeral for Pilot Sanit was finally arranged, Prime Minister Pibun Songkham himself came to lead the cortege. On the 9th of May 1941, a peace agreement arranged by Japan was signed upon by Thailand and French Indochina, finally ending the war, and in the end, Thailand got some of their old territory back from France. However, this war came at a cost. Many lives were lost during the war, including Pilot Sanit Normani and many other Thai airmen. And in order to honor them, a new war memorial was constructed. Today, this war memorial is known as the Victory Monument. Originally, it was created to honor the dead during the French Indochina War, but as time goes by, more names start appearing on the monument. And on present day, there are 801 names of soldiers and civilians who have lost their life in many of the war in Thai history. It was also a final resting place of more than 1,000 soldiers and civilians who have fought in many wars in Thai history. And finally, this monument serves as a reminder to us all that in this peaceful era, humanity should never wage war against one another, because the only thing it brings is death and destruction, and because those who forgot history are doomed to repeat it.